I have a very exciting attacking game I would like to show you, as it features a lot of sacrifices and covers also a lot of interesting attacking ideas which you may apply in your own games. But most important, apart from that, it's instructive. It's very enjoyable to watch. So let's have a look at this game between the two youngsters. One from India, the other one from Germany. Arjun Erigaisi with the white pieces, 20 years old, playing against Svane, 19 years old. So definitely we will hear more from these guys in the near future. And of course, if you would like to follow their progress, make sure to check out this channel and subscribe. I would really appreciate your support. Let's have a look at the game now. It starts with 1d4, and after knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, white captures on d5, e takes d5, and after knight c3, well, we have this kind of pawn structure with an imbalance. White has a pawn on the e-file, black one extra pawn on the c-file. It's the call-spot structure, but it can become really sharp. Black plays the move bishop b4, pinning the knight on c3, and this is the so-called Ragozin variation. White has several ideas. Bishop g5 is a logical developing move to pin the knight on f6. It's the main move, but bishop f4 is a very topical variation, one of the main continuations nowadays, but it gives black the chance to play the move knight e4. Black is playing very aggressively to put pressure on that knight on c3, which is pinned. White is gonna protect it with the move rook to c1, and here the move knight d7. It's definitely not the only move. Other moves have been tried here as well, but so far the players are following a game from Magnus Carlsen against Gukesh, played earlier this year in FIDE Grand Swiss. There followed also the move knight d2. Gukesh decided to take on c3, but now Svane decides to take on d2. So probably this is still preparation by both players. Queen takes d2, black goes for the move c6, overprotecting the pawn. And now after the move a3, black doesn't want to trade off the bishop for the knight, keeps the bishop on the board, goes back to e7, which is a good decision. e3, knight f6, and looks like black is doing okay. Right out of the opening, he has managed to trade off one pair of knights. The other knight comes into f6. Looks very solid structure, like not much is happening. And if white would continue with a normal developing move like bishop d3, the knight will come to h5. And the idea is very simple. Black would like to trade off the knight for the bishop, castle kingside next, and there are no problems whatsoever. However, I think Erigaisi understands the position very well, or at least he came up with some very interesting concept, which he thought this is very nice, worth trying at least in one game. So he doesn't want to surrender this bishop and play the move h4, so that whenever you attack this bishop with knight h5, the bishop can just stay on the board, can always drop back to h2 if it's needed. But the h-pawn is also looking for ideas to come forward. That's, of course, one of the main ideas, placing the pawn on h4 and not just modestly on one square forward on h3. So if you play bishop f5, the idea is to go f3, and the g-pawn will come very soon as well, and the bishop can easily get in trouble. So black went for the move castling kingside, but now it's bishop d3. The bishop reaches its ideal square from where it keeps an eye on the black king side. g6 is played. Very interesting move. On one hand, it's also a weakening move. It creates a hook. But at the same time, you're trying to put your king on g7 and neutralize the pressure exerted by that bishop on d3. So if white goes for f3 with the idea to go g4 and h5, there is knight h5 with an attack on the bishop, and the pawn on h4 can hang with check. So before making a decision, very instructive, guys, bishop g5. The bishop goes from f4 to g5, moving for a second time this game. But it's justified because the bishop can no longer be attacked by this move h6. Black goes for the move rook e8, and now white plays the move f3. I think this is very, very instructive, very typical structure. We are known from, we know this from the Carlsbad structures. When there's not a knight on f3, you can try to put the pawn on f3 to prepare e4 or sometimes even g4. And well, what black should do is probably a move like knight h5, trying to initiate the exchange of bishops with interesting play. Because if queens come off the board, there is a bit of pressure here against the pawn on e3. That's interesting. There are more aggressive ideas as well based on the move g4, and I'm pretty sure this was Erigaisi's idea. After taking on g5, you recapture, the knight comes into f4, cannot be taken because of the pin. You keep the bishop on the board, you can take on g5, you're winning a pawn, but after king f2, white is about to get a rook over to g1, the knight will be forced to go away, you can play the move f4, and the pawns start rolling, the queen is under attack. If the queen captures on g4, it's rook c to g1, and the queen is all of a sudden just trapped. Of course, this is not a forcing line, but it's an interesting attacking concept I wanted to show you. King g7 was played in the game, and now you may think, what is white gonna play here? King g7 is a very interesting move, as black is preparing the move knight g8. You feel like the knight is going into the wrong direction, but exchanging pieces is not a bad thing to do. What is white gonna do with its king? He has already advanced its pawns on the king side. He has already placed the rook on c1. Casting queenside is not allowed anymore. Well, Erigaisi knows what he's doing. He goes for the move king d1 and goes for a king walk to b1 so that the king is safe and the rooks will be eventually connected again. That's a very unusual idea, but definitely worth remembering. Black continues with the plan, knight g8, hoping that after bishop takes, queen takes, to trade off the bishops, put up some pressure against the pawn on e3. But now Erigaisi, another remarkable move. He keeps the bishop on the board. He's not interested in trading off the bishops now because the knight is not that actively placed on g8. The pawn on h4 can just be taken now. Bishop takes h4 was played. It's the first sacrifice of the game. But now white seizes the initiative in the center. Very nice move. Black is going to face some serious problems in the near future. If you take the pawn, knight takes e4, the knight is on its way to d6 with massive pressure being exerted by white's pieces. Note that the pawn on d4 cannot be taken because the bishop on h4 is hanging. So black was not interested in taking that pawn on e4. He played the move bishop e6, getting that bishop out, but the bishop itself, it's not doing much on that square. If you play a move like h6 right now, that's definitely better. With the plan of trying to swap the pieces with bishop g5 coming next, I think that's a very instructive defensive concept. But after e5, there is always pressure. There's a space advantage. You can move the king, you can advance the pawns. If the bishop is going away, then the f-pawn can come forward as well. Definitely practical compensation for white, and maybe even more. Bishop e6 was played in the game, and first white brought its king to a safer place with the move king c2, ready to come to b1. Black continues with the move h6, preparing that idea of the move bishop g5, and white continues here with the move g4. Very interesting attacking play. Maybe the bishop on h4 can get in trouble at some point. It's very unpleasant that the queen needs to keep it defended. Rook c8 was played, intending to pose some problems along the c file. Now white goes e5, black counters with the move c5, and here I think very important moment because black is about to play the move c4 and the bishop has to go to an inferior square. If you play the move king b1, your king is safe, and after something like c4, you can always come back with the bishop to c2. I think that's a very reasonable idea. Should also add that instead of advancing the pawn to c4, c takes d4 can now be met by knight to b5 with ideas of going to d6 or even regaining that pawn on d4. White is having a very active position, but Erigaisi played instead a move bishop e3, and I think this is very important because black should have gone here for the move c4, forcing the bishop to go to an inferior square to e2. It's no longer putting that pressure on the black king, and with a move like f5, it seems to me that black can try to sort of defend himself. It's not going to be an easy position, but it will be difficult for white to break through. In the game instead, they follow the move g5, trying to support the bishop and set up a blockade, but this is very weakening, obviously. King b1 was played, c takes d4, bishop takes d4, and now black's idea was to go for the move knight e7, so that black is about to get a knight to g6 and consolidate its position. But now, a big moment in the game, because sacrifice number 2 is coming. Rook takes h4 was played. Definitely it's not needed to play this move. You can even continue the attack with something like f4. Very interesting as well. But let's have a look. exchange sacrifice, g takes h4, and here again the f pawn can just be mobilized with ideas to come to f5. Rook h1 was played, and now white is about to take on h4 and take on h6 with a crushing attack with the queen and rook, and also the other pieces are ready to join anytime. Black played the move knight c6 to attack the bishop, but probably this is a wrong move. The knight should have stayed on the other side of the board. Maybe something like rook h8 to protect the pawn on h6 is a better defensive idea. But knight c6 played, the bishop comes back to f2. And I think this is all what had been calculated by both players. Knight takes e5. Black is capturing a pawn, is ready to take the bishop. Now it's bishop takes h4, f6, because you don't want to lose your queen. You put a pawn there. And probably Svane thought that he is doing okay. He's about to put a knight on f7, keep everything defended, and he is an exchange up. But maybe he just forgot about this move. Queen takes h6. Sacrifice number 3. Queen sacrifice. The queen cannot be taken because of bishop takes f6 with checkmate. The bishops are taking away the squares on the g-file. The king can't go anywhere. Beautiful checkmating pattern thanks to this discovered check. Therefore, the queen cannot be taken. The king went to f7 instead. And now, sacrifice number 4. Bishop g6. What a shot. Fantastic idea because, well, the king cannot really go to a good square. If you go to g8, boom! Queen h8 is another queen sacrifice. King takes, bishop takes f6 with double check. And if the king goes to g8, only move. It's rook h8 with checkmate. Also, if the king goes to e7, well, you can just take on f6 with check. You're winning material back because after king takes, it's bishop takes bishop takes e8, discover check, your pawn up, and the attack is still going on. So after bishop g6, only move is to take the bishop, but now it's queen h7 check, and after the king goes to f8, you take on g6 with a crushing attack. This is very, very nice because you're about to take on f6, rook h8, boom, checkmate, over. What should black do? In the game they followed rook c6 to try to set up a defense along the 6th rank. I should point out that bishop f7 doesn't help black at all. There's queen h6, and now if you go into the corner, it's again queen h8 with beautiful checkmating idea, as now after this double check with rook and bishop, king g8, rook h8, the bishop prevents the king from escaping to f7. The alternative is to go to e7, but now white can even choose taking with the queen or just with the bishop. You're winning the queen, at least that's totally winning for white. So let's see what happened in the game. Rook c6, now bishop takes f6, attacking the queen, rook h8. Black's idea was now to play the move bishop f5 check. You have to eliminate the bishop. Now, of course, the bishop can be taken in 2 different ways. If you take with the rook, well, that's happened in the game. Let's first see what happens after queen takes f6. It's rook h8 with check. And the rook cannot be taken because of the pin. If you go to e7, it's knight takes d5 with a knight fork. You're winning the queen. If you go to g7, it's queen h7 with checkmate. If you go to f7, it's queen h7 as well. And if you go to e6, it's just taking the rook. White is a piece up. If you block with the queen instead, queen takes, king takes, rook takes, and white also emerges with an extra piece. So queen takes f6, not possible. Rook takes f6, played in the game, but now it's rook h8 once again. King g7, queen h7 is checkmate. King f7 runs into queen h5, and well, if you block with your rook, it's rook h7, and the king got to give up the protection of the rook. After king f6, it's queen f5, and it's checkmate, obviously. So then if you go to e7 instead, well, it's knight takes d5 and everything is hanging. You can take on e8 followed by taking the rook on f6. So the king went instead to e7. Now you capture on d5 with check. It's a knight fork. It's game over. Just there are a few things you have to do precisely. If you go king d6, I would like to take on e8 first before anything else. If you take back, I'm going to take with a knight on f6, and it's just an extra piece for white. If you take on f5, it's rook takes d8, and white emerges once again with an extra piece. Crushing attack. One final little trick by Rasmus Svane. He took with the queen on d5, eliminated the knight with the idea that if you take the queen, it's rook takes h8, and you still got to win an endgame of queen versus 2 rooks, which is of course doable. That's not a problem for white, having an active queen and a lot of extra pawns. But much better, much more clever is of course to take on e8 with check, and after king takes, queen takes d5, you're queen up versus a rook. So after rook takes e8, Svane had seen enough. I thought this was a very instructive mating attack, a lot of creative ideas, and probably Svane missed this beautiful queen sacrifice. Let me know what you think of this game. Was this just a brilliancy by Erigaisi or very poor defense by Svane? Let me know in the comments what you think of this game. Subscribe to the channel, and many more games from this tournament are going to be covered on this channel. So see you soon again. Bye bye.